countdown. So remember, we finished up with the Brooks Sumner incident at 7. Okay, number 6 is going to be the creation of the Republican Party. Okay, so remember, just to review, the Democratic Party was created by Andrew Jackson, okay, after the corrupt bargain, and then the Whig Party was created to oppose Andrew Jackson, okay? So this is going to be about the creation of the Republican Party. So when we talk about the Republican Party, they're made up of 4 groups, okay? So you need to write down the 4 groups. So they're made up of Northern Whigs, a branch and break off of the Northern Democrats, the Free Soilers, who remember we talked about were anti-expansion of slavery, and then this creation of these Know-Nothings. Okay, so mostly these 4 groups are going to come together after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, after that issue of popular sovereignty and all of the violence that is happening in Kansas. And again, kind of the common thing that brings them together is going to be that they oppose slavery extending west. Okay, so again, immediately you kind of notice that they're not completely abolitionist, where we talked about end slavery immediately. Again, their main position is going to be to stop the spread of slavery. Okay, so again, make sure you have in your lines Northern Whigs, Northern Democrats, Free Soilers, and the Know-Nothings. Okay, and we're going to take a specific look at the Know-Nothings. Okay, which is also known as the American Party. So this is one of the 4 groups that came together. They're going to be based on this idea of nativism. So they're known as nativists. And basically what that means, they prefer a native-born American over an immigrant. Okay, so keeping it real simple, they're anti-immigrant. Okay, so we'll actually see them again when we talk about like more the progressive era. Okay, and then just like we talked about, the Know-Nothings are a political party that are against immigrants. They were known as nativists. Okay, so make sure you get these 2 definitions, and again, we'll kind of highlight anything that I've underlined on that paper for you. Okay, so again, this is going to lead to the 1856 presidential election. Okay, so again, looking at the winner, James Buchanan as a Democrat, you see for the first time a Republican candidate, and then Millard Fillmore, still that Whig Party like we talked about, is holding on. Okay, looking at that map. So again, remember when we looked at the 1852 electoral map, okay, which let me scroll back. Okay, so remember we talked about a lot more unity, only a few states that had voted for the Whig Party. Then looking at 1856, okay, again, as we move closer to that 1860 mark at the start of the war, you start seeing a clear division, okay, between the North and the South, okay? And looking at it, the North is historically voting Republican, okay, anti-expansion of slavery, and the South is going to vote Democrat, okay? And then just one solid state wins for the American Party. Okay, countdown number 5, Dred Scott versus Sanford. Okay, so this is going to be a super important court case. So again, highlight, star, mark up. Okay, so I've broken it down for you: background, decision, and then impact. Okay, with the most important thing being kind of this lasting impact. Okay, so while you write, I'll kind of give you a little bit of the background information. When we talk about Dred Scott, he was an enslaved man. Okay, he is sold back and forth several times. Okay, he has an incredible journey. Several times his owner had passed away, and then he is kind of like passed down to family, and then has sold or traded off. He gets married and has a wife, and together they actually get to stay together, which is really rare. And Dred Scott several times is going to be moved into free territories. Okay, so him and his wife separately sue for their freedom based on the idea that once you are in a free territory, you become free and you cannot be brought back into slavery. Okay, so several times, okay, he actually has to retry his case multiple times. One time winning his freedom, then there was a mistrial, he had to retry, losing his freedom, and then it is eventually brought to the Supreme Court. Okay, so several Supreme Court questions are kind of being brought up. So one, if a slave is brought into a free territory, does that make them free? And then really this bigger question, can a slave even sue for their freedom? Can a slave sue? Okay, so a couple decisions being made. So the Supreme Court decides in this idea of the 3630 line that was wrong to begin with. Okay, so the federal government had no power to regulate slavery in the territories. So again, Congress should never have even issued the Missouri Compromise, allowing the 3630 line to make that decision for the people. Okay, so lots of impacts come out from this. Okay, number one, slaves. And again, really when this is talking about slaves, former or present slaves, so even if you were currently freed, again, this is eliminating any rights really for African Americans at this time. They were considered not to be citizens, and because they were not citizens, they're not being protected by the Constitution, so they could not have any rights to sue in the court. So no, Dred Scott should not have ever even been able to sue for his freedom. Okay? And again, going up to this idea of the federal government had no power to regulate slavery, so the Missouri Compromise is unconstitutional. Okay, so officially the 3630 line disappears. And slaves were considered property. Okay, so again, reiterating the idea they can absolutely not sue in court for their freedom. Okay, so interesting fact. So again, Dred Scott once again kind of loses his freedom under this. And eventually, so again, like I told you, his owner had passed away, so the owner's wife had him, and then she finally gets remarried. And the crazy thing is she remarries an abolitionist who was very much so anti-slavery, and obviously like this court case had gotten like a lot of news, a lot of recognition, and so basically when she remarried, her new husband allowed him to free both Dred Scott and his wife, which unfortunately he only had 1 year of freedom before he died of tuberculosis. Okay, hopefully everybody got number 5, and again I'm going to post this on Google Classroom if I'm moving too fast. Okay, Abraham Lincoln, as far as early life, again, you don't have to write this down. There is no spot for it on your notes. Okay, but again, he was born in Kentucky. Again, kind of grew up like backwoods, kind of poor, very much so self-educated. So he taught himself until much later in his life, until his later 20s. So he lived in Indiana. Mostly, we're going to see him and focus on him in Illinois. He had a very religious mother who was against slavery. So he's always kind of had this in his past. Okay, and we're going to see him be elected to Congress. So that's kind of his stepping stone to his presidency. Okay, Lincoln in politics. Okay, so Lincoln was a former Whig Party member. Okay, but he's going to leave and to help kind of create and to join this Republican Party. So very often, especially in this time period, Lincoln is going to be kind of this definite overarching figure for the Republican Party. Okay, so in 1858, Lincoln decided to go against Stephen Douglas, okay, who was running for the 3rd time in his Senate seat. Okay, again, his big position, not anti-slavery, okay, but to stop the spread of slavery. Okay, and remember, we know Stephen Douglas is very much so for that idea of popular sovereignty. In this battle for the Senate seats, okay, we're going to see Lincoln and Douglas, okay, again, very opposed to each other, kind of have these opposite ideals, but we're going to see them kind of have the first public debates, okay, so they say, all right, let's bring the issues directly to the people, okay, so that's going to lead to our next one, Number 4, the Lincoln-Douglas debates. Okay, so again, this is during that time period. Same thing. They are debating over who gets that Illinois Senate seat. Okay, and just like we already talked about, so this should be a refresher. So Lincoln was a Republican, and again, his main objective during these debates, okay, he wanted no slavery in the Western Territory. So again, anti-expansion of slavery. Okay, Stephen Douglas, who was a Democrat, again wanted to leave it up to that people under the idea of popular sovereignty. Okay, so remember, every time that we talk about Stephen Douglas, you have to remember, okay, he's our popular sovereignty guy. He says leave it up to the people. Okay, so they go, and it's a series of debates. So there are 7 debates in the 7 different kind of districts that they have in Illinois. So it kind of shows it up here in this map. Okay, so circulating all over Illinois. Again, publicly debating, letting the people kind of hear where they stand, which is something very new for the time. Okay, looking at back now and how all of the presidential debates or, elections are kind of publicized and very much so on TV and on the news. It wasn't really like that at the time. So this is kind of a unique thing that these gentlemen are doing. Okay, so again, just make sure you know party and their core belief on this one. Okay, so during these speeches, okay, we have both gentlemen kind of issuing kind of their declaration of statements, okay? So with Stephen Douglas, you need to know the Freeport Doctrine, okay? And with the Freeport Doctrine, he kind of isn't as pro-slavery as kind of some people give him, and instead that he's saying that the Freeport Doctrine, okay, it is totally okay. So remember, the Missouri Compromise had been declared unconstitutional, but he's saying that unlike what Congress said, it's really more on people that the people decide. And the way the people can decide to be anti-slavery is basically passing laws or electing leaders that are going to be anti-slavery. Okay? So again, kind of boiling down that slavery should not exist unless it's controlled by the police. Okay? And literally that's talking about like the laws and things like that that help regulate slavery. So if people are going to be opposed to slavery, they need to elect people who are also opposed to slavery who are going to create anti-slavery laws. Okay, so again, that's kind of what it's talking about, like being policed by the law. Okay, and on the other hand, and we'll talk about that a little bit later, Abraham Lincoln, in this same debate, kind of issues his House divided speech. Okay, so a house divided cannot stand. So really, Lincoln is saying the United States is not going to make it half slave, half free. Like, he just sees that the division is destroying the country. So he basically says we need to either be all slavery or we need to be all free, but we cannot continue to exist half and half. Okay? And kind of looking at this quote right here. Can the people of a territory in any lawful way, against the wishes of any citizen of the United States, exclude slavery from their limits prior to the formation of a state constitution? So if you're going to exclude slavery, it needs to be done before you become a state, before you apply for statehood. As Mr. Lincoln has heard me answer 100 times from every stump in Illinois, that in my opinion the people of a territory can, by lawful means, exclude slavery from their limits, again, prior to the formation of a state constitution. Okay, and then in here he's kind of calling out Lincoln, like, don't say that I believed in any other way. Don't say I'm pro-slavery. That's not what I said. All right, number 3, we're going to see Radical John Brown again. Okay, so John Brown, okay, had this great idea to start a slave revolt. So again, what he wants to do, he's going to steal guns from an arsenal. So again, a place where you store your weapons at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. He tries to get a couple men. Again, I don't know if I'd be bold enough to follow John Brown. Okay, but he gets a couple of men to take the weapons. And basically what he was going to do is take those weapons and give them to the slaves. Okay, then the slaves were going to use that to kind of rise up against their owners and kind of take their own freedom. Okay, so he was going to use this, and again, eventually, enough this would happen, and this would create their kind of own free state in the South. Okay, now again, an arsenal's kind of usually heavily protected. Okay, so John Brown was not going to get away for long. Okay, and it wasn't really super successful because, again, a lot of the slaves didn't really want to participate for fear of their own lives and things like that. Okay, so his objective is to start a slave revolt. Okay, he did that by stealing guns at Harper's Ferry, Virginia. And then he's going to use those to create an uprising and create a free state. But unsuccessful, John Brown and his followers are going to be captured. They're tried for treason, so again, going against your country. Okay, so he tried to create an armed uprising. Not cool. And then he was going to be publicly hanged. Okay, so he's kind of his infamous last words. He talks about the crimes of this guilty land will never be purged away but with blood. So again, this is kind of hinting at and foreshadowing this is only going to escalate into more violence and it's going to end with more blood being shed, kind of hinting at we're going to go to war over this issue. Okay, so we see the picture that we've already seen of John Brown, and then this mural is kind of painted in the Kansas Capitol building. And again, it kind of shows the foreshadowing of this conflict of the Civil War in the background. Okay, so again, we kind of see him in different ways. So Madman, was he crazy? Was he a hero? Or was he a martyr? So someone who kind of died for his cause. Alright, and with that, we'll pick up with 2 and 1 tomorrow. Okay, again, if you want to go back and pause in certain parts, that's fine. I'm also posting this on Google Classroom if you need to catch up, and I'll fill in any blanks that you are missing tomorrow.